I want to bring in Robert Boland, who joins us from New York City. He's an expert in the business of sports and sports law. He teaches at Ohio University. Welcome back to the show. Robert, first of all, do you think the IOC will ban all Russian athletes from the games?
That's a step that they've passed on taking at least now, and I suspect will probably pull themselves back from the brink of something so drastic, because there will very clearly be innocent athletes caught in that. I think they'll probably try to come some intermediate step of putting the Russian Olympic IOC or Russian Olympic Committee on probation and go to some reasonable intermediate check. But I think that's going to be the outcome, although there's a lot of pressure to suspend them.
Russia's track and field team banned from the Olympics. Their appeal was rejected. How significant was that?
It's very significant because we've never seen a superpower ever suspended or banned from the games. On the other hand, the allegations that are contained in the McLaren report are pretty shocking, and they talk about a widespread state-sponsored doping apparatus that even implicates innocent athletes too, because their tests in Russia would be untrustworthy based on this. So I hope that there's a way to get some of the athletes who have tested positive or tested negative around the world in international competition through to compete, possibly under the Olympic flag or as a non-entered nation athlete. But I think it's an interesting challenge for all of us as we do this, and it really does come back to how much athletes can be caught up in this, even ones who have tested negative throughout their career.
You mentioned that, but what happens now? We're just 2 weeks away from the Rio Games. I mean, certainly this will cast a pall over the games. Russian athletes, do you think any of them can still compete? And just a few weeks ago, the main testing lab for these athletes wasn't even ready. What's going to happen?
Well, everything in the Olympics comes together at the 11th or maybe even the 11th and a half hour. So I suspect the testing lab will be ready. I think the Rio Games will be ready to go. There's certainly been enough bad about it. I would suspect that the Russian delegation will probably come to Rio and try to be accredited and then have to be turned away by Olympic officials to make this a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more geopolitical statecraft. I think there'll be some athletes who will have an opportunity, or at least the door is propped open for athletes to compete under the Olympic flag. I'm not sure, given the politics of this, any will, and it really does polarize an Olympics that has at least been taking on water wounded and injured coming into it with Zika, some of the upheaval in Brazil. So it really is a more difficult games for Rio coming up in 2 weeks.
You mentioned the geopolitical aspect. Talk about the reaction to this ruling, especially other teams, other countries, other governments around the world. First of all, what message is this sending to everyone? I mean, is it really, look, we're cracking down, you've got to end this doping?
It certainly, well, that's at least the front message, that the countries who have seen doping go on over the years have never seen a situation like this. Russia's reaction is that they're being unfairly targeted, and this is highly politicized, particularly given how important or how much importance Vladimir Putin puts on Olympic sports and the Olympic movement as part of his statecraft. So we're seeing other nations going, well, who's next? Is this just politics by another name? I think it's difficult to figure out whether this is the integrity of sport or whether there's politics or there's a bit of both in every element taken from it. But it's certainly unprecedented, and it sort of is pushing the drug testing back into the headlines, which is a difficult place to be.
All right, Robert Boland, we always appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us from New York.
As always, thank you.